Hello there. My name is Brett Heatherich and I'm the Senior Industry Engagement Coordinator here at the Victoria Responsible Gambling Foundation. Thank you for joining us for the Foundation's webinar on the EGM gaming machine venue self-exclusion programs. This is a really important webinar. It's important for gamblers, health services and others to be aware of self-exclusion programs so that they're able to explain it to clients and to people that might be interested, and also to be able to know how to refer people into self-exclusion programs if that's something that their clients or others wish to access. Joining us today for this webinar is Adrian Hempling from the Australian Hotels Association Self-Exclusion Program, Neil Murray and Michelle Dalmo, both from the Community Clubs Victoria Self-Exclusion Program, and Sonia Bauer and her team from the Responsible Gambling Centre at Crown Melbourne, who will speak a little bit about the Crown Casino Self-Exclusion Program as well. The first speaker you'll hear from is Adrian from the Australian Hotels Association, the AHA. Unfortunately, we missed the first minute or so of his opening statement. What we've missed basically is Adrian introducing himself, and we join the action with him beginning to outline the AHA self-exclusion program, providing some details on it, and giving a bit of information on how that program works. Enough from me. Enjoy the rest of the webinar. Thank you.
Shepparton, and obviously all the Melbourne metro area, all the suburbs and the city in Melbourne. So what we have access to is 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. We're available to have appointments in the city for patrons that want to sign up to self-exclusion. They can come in and see us, and we can help them with that. We also, I'm also out on the road as well, so I will quite often visit where Gamblers Help Services are provided to sign up patrons over there. So that's different suburbs such as Baronia, down to Cranbourne and Frankston, across to Geelong and Colac, up to Bendigos and Ballarat and Seymours. So that's sort of like the perimeter that I will travel out to. And also as far as I've been down to Traralgon as well. So it's quite accessible to meet people out in their own suburbs. They don't always have to travel in to the city to see us. If a patron wants to sign up and they're living further away, like I mentioned, the Sheppartons or the Warrnambool, we have arrangements with a solicitor in quite a few of the different towns where they can go and have their deed, which is the paperwork that explains how self-exclusion works, witnessed by the solicitor and explained to them by the solicitor on our behalf. And they can arrange a photo with a photographer that we have in the town, or just through the local post office, so that we can get an image of what the person looks like to be able to upload it and contact the venues. So we're sending out letters at this stage to venues once people are signed up, which has their basic details on it of their name, date of birth, address, so basic identifying information and a picture of their photos. We work in close partnership with CCB, so there's no real difference from a patron's point of view, whether they sign up with us or CCB about, to do with the hotels or clubs in their local area. They just need to sign up with one of us, and it does the same thing from their point of view, from the client's point of view. So I hope that's helping make some sense about the basics of where we are and what we do. I guess at every interview that I have when I'm signing up someone, I'm also checking in with them if they currently have any access to a support service, such as Gamblers Help, or whether they're linked in with their own private psychologist or professional. Otherwise, I'm providing them with some resources around, as in the contact details of Gamblers Help, and also prepared to fill in a referral form with them if they would like to go ahead and arrange some support from Gamblers Help. At the same time, I do mention about a couple other programs that some other clients and patrons have found helpful. Some people like the Gamblers Anonymous approach, some people don't. So I just let them know that's available out in the different areas for them if they choose to access that. I also promote the Free Yourself program by Gabby Byrne, because some people have found that helpful. And more importantly, for people to be aware of the concept behind that, which is about, I talk about how it's about getting out of the gaming room, because normally the people that are signing up have been in the gaming room beyond what they wanted to be in, and getting involved in something in their local community. So whether it's something through their neighbourhood house or local council or local library, so trying to re-engage in something in their community to get them a bit busy and a bit more in a different headspace, which is good for them, if they would like to do that. The other one that I mentioned is a peer connection program, which is accessible over the telephone, which is a volunteer with lived experience that they can talk to, and some people have found that to be quite helpful as well. And I think that's about all that I wanted to say right this second. So please ask any questions. But otherwise, I might pass it over and I might fill in some details later.
Okay. Thank you very much, Adrian. I'm just having a look. No one's typed in any questions. What I can do, if we want to, is unmute people's mics so people can ask questions, or I'm happy for us to push on and hear from the other providers as well, and then have some questions after that. I'm happy to be led by what people think or what the comments might be. So, excellent. I'm seeing enough people saying keep going, so that's good, because that means you don't have to hear much more from me, and I can hand over to the next set of speakers. So thanks, guys. The next group in my just double checking I did do alphabetically, that makes sense. Listing is for the Community Clubs Victoria. Joining us from there is Michelle Della, who's at the back of the room, and also Neil Murray, who I haven't listed on there but is joining us as well. And they're going to speak a little bit about how the Community Clubs Victoria program functions. Some of it is similar to the AHA, but there are some important differences as well. So I'll hand over to them and let them talk to you about it. Thanks, guys.
Well, good morning, folks. We've decided to do a two-hander, and just for the purpose of clarification, Michelle is the one with the longer hair. And it's also true, you can see us, but we can't see you. So I've got to say right up front, it's probably true that the camera does add several kilograms to most people's appearance. That's how I count for mine. We want to talk today about our self-exclusion program for clubs, which we've called EASE, Easy Access Self-Exclusion, and certainly Michelle will go through the details. That Michelle manages the program. She engages our team in dealing with customers, and we've recently made some pretty significant changes at some significant investment cost to us to make it a more workable tool for you as practitioners and support people. You know, the program fits in a sort of behavioural model of change. You know, it's sort of in that preparation, action and maintenance quadrant. And one of the things that the ministerial direction has made perfectly clear right from the get-go, back when it was when the first ministerial direction came about, was that the self-exclusion programs must be designed to facilitate self-exclusion and not put unnecessary barriers or impediments in the way. And we certainly saw in the way that the systems were first designed, going right back to the first one, which was the Crown and the two gaming operators back in the late 90s, a lot of administrative steps in there which we've tried to eliminate in the design of EASE. The principal one being that from the customer's point of view, we're really keen to make it, if so desired, to be a one-stop process. So that when you're dealing with someone who has made a decision or is making a decision about their gambling, they needn't necessarily, unless you want or need them to, they needn't necessarily go through a number of steps or a number of different visits or a number of different locations to complete their deed of self-exclusion. Added to that, of course, we really value the ongoing the underpinning of the program through venue support workers training and interaction with at venues, at our members' clubs, which is designed to constantly remind our staff about the need for vigilance. Pleased to note that as we look at it, and look at more recently the self-exclusion program review, we see really clear evidence that clubs do take the responsibility to care for self-excluded persons very seriously. And we hope that you find the use of ease relatively easy. Now, I think Michelle's going to take us through how that's going to work, and I think any questions at all about it and how it might affect the way you deal with your clients, Michelle is the on-site expert for it and she can deal with any question related to it.
Hi everyone. As Neil said, we've introduced a new program called EASE, so Easy Access Self-Exclusion. We believe it's more user-friendly. So our program is similar to the AHA's as far as the client or the patron needs to sign a deed of self-exclusion. We take their name, address, personal particulars and the venues that are giving them concern to also add to their deed. Also on their deed, they get to nominate the length of time they'd like to be on the program. So the minimum time is 6 months, and the maximum is 2 years. So any time between that is fine. It's totally up to them and what they're comfortable in doing. So once they're comfortable, we've taken them through the deed of self-exclusion, liaised with them along the way. They get the opportunity to ask if they have questions if they choose to do so. They then sign off on the deed. We witness the deed. Then we take 2 photos. So we do a front-on photo, also a side profile. And then we upload them onto our system, which is EASE, and then we notify the venues that are on the deed that this person is now a self-excluded person. The hotel clubs, we then email the information over to the AHA, and then they follow through and notify their venues. But one of the main focus of EASE is that with our program we liaise throughout the state with a lot of gamblers' health officers. So for the client, it can work in several ways. So the client may have an ongoing relationship with a therapeutic counsellor, and then from discussions with that counsellor, they might decide that self-exclusion is a good tool for that client. So the counsellor will contact us and say, my client's interested in self-exclusion, with the client's permission to pass on their details to myself or my team. We generate the deed of self-exclusion. We email that deed through to the therapeutic counsellor, who then can take their client in their comfortable environment through that self-exclusion process. They also take their photographs and either email or text them through to me, whichever they're comfortable with. And then we again upload them onto our system, notify the venues and the AHA if they're a set one venue. So that works really well for us, and also for the client. We have also where the client will call us directly and say, I want to join the self-exclusion, can you tell me about it, etc. Depending on the location, if the person doesn't want to come to our office in CCB, in Fitzroy, so say for example it's a client that's regional, we can then contact the Gamblers Help Office that we have a relationship with and say, I've got a new client, would you be able to see this client, etc., etc. So not on all occasions the client initially is seeking Gamblers Help, but they are comfortable to go along to that office. And often, and quite often, what happens with when the client goes along to that environment, the client feels quite comfortable that they're in this environment and is happy to continue. So it works really well as far as that goes. Excuse me. Also, we offer a telephone service. So, for example, in CAPS in Ballarat, it works both ways. They contact us for our deed of self-exclusion, or I can contact them, or one of my team can contact them and say, I've got a client that's interested in self-exclusion, lives in Ballarat. So again, I put the deed together, email that through. When the client arrives at CAPS, they give me a call. I move to a private office, so there's no feedback and phones ringing in the background. And then we go through the deed of self-exclusion over the phone. The phone is in their office on speakerphone. So the client's quite comfortable to ask any questions or any queries that they have. The Gamblers Help counsellor is there to sign off on the deed and also take photographs. So it works really well. And then also we have, as I said, people are very welcome to come in to our office. So we have a private office. We have two units, so they can go to the other unit, which is private. So for us, we think we have a very good program, and it works really well. So across the border, or sort of on the border, I should say, we have relationships with those counsellors also. So for those people that live, for example, in Swan Hill, Mildura or Echuca, those clients can go along there. They can have counselling. They can not only ban themselves from venues in Victoria, they can also ban themselves from venues in New South Wales, all at that one appointment. So from our perspective, it's a real win-win, situation for the client. I think I've just about covered it all. So we're looking with the new EASE program. We are looking forward or moving forward with giving access to various participating Gamblers Help counsellors' offices, where they'll be given, if they choose to, their own username and password to the EASE program, which will enable them, for example, when a client comes along for a counselling session, they discuss various options and suggest self-exclusion. It'll mean that counsellor won't have to call us for a deed. They'll be able to, with their username and password, access the EASE program directly and download a deed there and then for the client to sign. So it eliminates any wait time for the client. They don't have to book in if they don't want to, if they want to do it there and then. They have access to the program there. So at the end of August, we're taking the EASE program across the state, giving training sessions where both clubs and Gamblers Help officers are invited to come along. So I would also like to say in that we have many of our clubs are also willing and do a regular self-exclusion interviews. So it's entirely up to the client. Some clients aren't comfortable going back into a venue where there is poker machines. Although the interview is obviously conducted in the club's boardroom, it's not nowhere near the poker machines, but as I said, it's up to the client totally. But for some clients, they're not quite comfortable with the gambler's help scenario. So for them, they've already got a relationship with the staff at the club. They know the manager, they might know the bar staff, etc. So they're more than comfortable to go in and sign the deed of self-exclusion with the manager or the gaming manager of that venue. Again, the deed is witnessed by the manager. They take the photos and again email or text them through to us. So I think we cover a lot of different options for the client, have many to choose from. So we're happy to work with whatever the client is comfortable with at the end of the day. So it's done in a timely and professional manner. So I think I've just about covered off on all that. So if you have any questions for me,
Yep.
don't hesitate to ask.
There are a couple of questions up there, and I'm conscious I might be the only person close enough to read them. But quickly before I get to those questions, just for Gamblers Help people that are accessing the webinar, an email with the information on those dates and training and such went out to everybody last week in the manager's alert, so you should be able to access that. And if you or any one of the counsellors or others at your agency are interested in attending, the instructions for how to note your attendance in the email, but basically you click on the link and it goes to Michelle at CCV, and they'll note that you want to come along, and you'll be able to come along and go to the session that talks about that EASE program in a bit more detail. There are a couple of questions that I think it's probably worth addressing now just before we move on to the casino stuff, because they relate to those two venue programs. So the first question there that people can see is, I think, in two parts, which says, could you please talk about what the consequences are for self-excluded clients who continue to visit venues? I think that's the first part of the question, as well as issues around venue staff when they know that they have a patron in the venue who is self-excluded. So I think that first part of the question, what are the consequences for self-excluded clients who visit venues? I'd be interested in hearing from either the AHA or CCV. I mentioned it's fairly similar, but whoever wants to take that. Look at everyone, look at.
So for the consequences of someone wanting to sign up in a venue, is that?
No, I think they're talking about someone who's signed up and then you've got someone who is breaching or attending venues.
Okay, my apologies. So if someone breaches and they're identified, the patron is asked to, first of all, the patron is reminded that they are on the self-exclusion program and that they had committed to not entering the gaming area of the venue and are asked to leave. The staff member who also identified the patron would register a breach, and that would automatically send through an email to the EASE program. We then register that breach. We also send out a notice, a letter to the patron reminding of their commitment to the self-exclusion program, asking them if they would like any further assistance with their commitment, being Gamblers Help, etc. And we also notify all the venues that are on the deed to be on the lookout for this person that they have breached. If the person did re-offend, like re-breach again, we would make a phone call then directly to that client or patron and just chat to them about why they were doing that and address that situation depending on their feedback. So that would be how we handle a breach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You got anything to add?
Yeah, I think the main point of it is there isn't actually a consequence as such that we impose on the person because it's a voluntary self-help initiative. And at the end of the day, the client, the patron, still has control for their own behaviour. Like, as in, responsibility for their own behaviour. So what we see it more as is not about consequences. We see it more as more around the help-seeking aspect of it, to try to then work with the person to try to, address some of their issues. And we do that through, ensuring that they are linked in with, a support person like a gambler's help counsellor or other professional. So we see it more as the need for assistance rather than a consequence as such. That's how we've approached it from our side of things.
But at a practical level, I don't know who asked the question, but at a practical level,
Someone called Georgie Being asked the question.
so at the club site, the clubs, organise their scrutiny of the photographs in a hierarchy, typically with people who are already known to them or have self-excluded at the site, to then into people who live locally. The photographs of local people and or people who know the club are highlighted, and certainly if someone has formally breached, the awareness of the photograph is heightened as well. So there's a high awareness of those most likely to be in need of being asked to leave, because many people will nominate a whole range of clubs that they might have only just seen or driven past or not actually be, but clearly if someone lives near a club, they're at a greater risk of changing their behaviour. So that's the way in which clubs try to manage the hundreds of images they've got to deal with in terms of recognising if someone is about to breach.
Absolutely. There's a follow-up question here from another user that says, what happens if the person is not caught at the venue, so they're not detected, but in the process of their counselling with the Gamblers Help Counsellor, they disclose that they've breached their exclusion order? The counsellor asks, can the counsellor speak to someone, and who do they call, on the idea that they've got consent from the client? And I would say, without getting everyone to say it, everyone would say, on the idea the client's given consent, regardless of which program they're on, you would welcome communication from a counsellor saying, my client was reported breaching here. And what that then does, if the person hasn't been detected, but then that breach is reported, it sets in that process that Michelle and Adrian spoke about. So the venues would be informed, the client would be informed, and there'd be follow-up in that space. So certainly from our perspective, and I think from all of you guys, if a client discloses that they're breaching their exclusion order, we would love you to report that on to the program administrator, either yourself or encourage a client to do it, because that then kicks in all of those support processes and makes the self-exclusion program more effective. So in terms of who you call, you can, well, for the venues, for gamblers, you could probably ring either program because they'll sort it out, but I mean, preferably whichever exclusion program they've signed up with, just ring that operator. Another question that was on there related to what Michelle was talking about with taking photos for Gamblers Help staff, and someone's asked about privacy issues with Gamblers Help staff using mobiles, sometimes their personal mobile potentially, to take photographs. The basic answer to that question is there could be some privacy concerns. The way that the foundations address that is to say, on the idea that they can be addressed through your internal agency privacy policies and what you need to work with. On the idea that can be sort of, we're keen for Gamblers Help staff to be able to take that photo and proceed deeds that way, but you would need to figure out a process that works internally for your agency to ensure that you get either sufficient consent or take the client's privacy into account. And I think we probably have a preference for people not using their personal mobiles, that if this is a program that the Gamblers Help Agency wishes to take on, that we provide them with sufficient stuff to be able to do that at work without having to use their private materials. So hopefully that answers that question. If not, feel free to type in some more stuff and say, come on, Brett, you didn't answer my question for me. If anyone else has got any questions about anything, feel free to type them in. But what I might do is hand over to the guys from Crown to be able to talk about their program as well. It's not surprising necessarily that the casino program differs reasonably from venue programs just because of the nature of the business. But we do have with us here, and you can see on them, we've got Sonia, who is, I'm going to get your title wrong, Sonia, head honcho of the responsible gambling area. And we've got Kate and Susan, two of the psychologists from Crown, and also Leon, who's involved in their program as well. So I'll hand over to all of those guys and get them to speak a little bit about how Crown's program works. There we go. Over to you guys. Whoever's doing the talking. Don't all jump in at once.
Leon will do the talking, but I was going to do the intro. So
Please
thank
do.
you for doing the intro, but
Oh.
you can throw to Leon. But
Sorry.
Brett, no. But quite rightly, Brett, what you said is that it does differ on a couple of levels in terms of that. Our self-exclusion program does go through the Casino Control Act, so necessarily there are some differences in terms of paperwork and execution and those sorts of things. But I'll throw over to Leon to talk about how all that works and how we participate in all of this.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'll talk first about the purpose-built facility that we have, which is the Responsible Gambling Support Centre. It's for those of you familiar with Crown itself, it's located just below the food court. So it's very central and it's off the gaming floor. So it's very accessible for customers who are self-excluded or customers who want to come and make an inquiry. It's discreet. And it has to be off the gaming floor because self-excluded patrons cannot be on the gaming floor. Now, all our numbers that we have, we've got a 1-800 number, we've got landline, we've got contact available through the guest support services, referrals through all levels of table games from VIP through main floor. We've got responsible gaming liaison officers on site 24/7. So everyone's contactable at all times and no appointments are necessary. So in fact, we don't encourage appointments because people say they'll come at a certain time and they don't turn up. We have a very extensive training program, which is rolled out to all new employees at induction. All frontline gaming staff have to do online assessment. They go further advanced training as well with observable signs. So we push a lot on referral to our support services. We're also very proactive in being visible, being available for crisis intervention, welfare checks, and of course to facilitate the self-exclusion program. So I'll talk about the self-exclusion program now. It covers the gaming floor only. It is a legal document and it has to be voluntary. So when we get an inquiry, anyone that wants to self-exclude, they come down to the center, we ask them to bring photo ID with them. We do take a photograph, we conduct an interview, we run through the legalities and the boundaries of the self-exclusion before we start the interview so that everyone's on the same page. So we cover the consequences as well and the fact that it is indefinite. So once they sign the order, if they don't make an application to revoke, they remain self-excluded for life. Okay. With the questions that we ask, they're not very personal. It's just mainly their name, their date of birth, address. We also ask them if they'd like a follow-up in 3 months. That's generally just to provide more assistance if they require it. The self-exclusion itself, as I said, covers the gaming floor. There are consequences if they breach, and that's administered by the VCGLR. It's always a written warning first, subsequent verbal warnings before the VCGLR make a decision whether they want to issue a penalty notice, or subsequently, if they keep breaching, it's escalated to an exclusion order, which then allows the VCGLR to take them to court. So that, in a nutshell, is our self-exclusion program. We also do have a chaplaincy and counseling services provided at the center. It's generally a one-off because we like to refer everyone to Gamblers Help. The last thing you want is someone with a gambling problem to keep coming back to the casino for appointments. They'll have a punt before or after. So to avoid that, we always refer to Gamblers Help. That's in a nutshell about self-exclusion. I suppose there's one other thing I'd like to touch on is that we do offer joint self-exclusions for Perth as well. So everyone that comes to self-exclude gets offered that option. And if they say yes, they'd like to self-exclude from Perth, from Crown Perth, we will complete the paperwork for them. Vice versa, Perth does the same thing for us. All our documents are then handed to the VCGR. They get a copy. Within the company, surveillance and security are notified of people that are self-excluded as they assist us with being vigilant when people breach. I'll take questions.
Yes. Anyone got any questions about Crown's process. You can see that that's slightly different. The other comment I would make quickly is that the self-exclusion from the Crown process covers all forms of gambling. So when you exclude, you exclude. When we talk about gaming floor, you mean tables, everything.
PGMs, yep.
The one we talk about for electronic gaming machine venues only covers the electronic gaming machine area. It's another slight difference with the way that the programs work. Question for Crown. Here we go. And thank you, saying hi, Brett. That's nice. The question for Crown: do clients see their psychologist prior to signing the self-exclusion deed?
They're given the option to either see their psychologist or a lawyer if they have any questions regarding the deed. Generally, if it's a session that they want to have, our psychologists are available prior to them signing it, or even after.
Yeah, I think that covers that one off. Now, somebody has asked too, and I think this is a question for everybody. What is okay? Good. Okay, we'll get to all of those. Out of curiosity, someone's asked how many would you have signed up to self-exclusion? I assume that was addressed to Crown because that was when you guys were talking. But I don't know if anyone can talk about how many people are on their self-exclusion program. I don't know if you're allowed to. But
I don't know. It's a common question that people have. A patron will say to me, like, am I the only one that's getting signed up to self-exclusion? And the answer is, of course, no. I actually talk about how sometimes the difficulty for some venue staff are they may have a book of self-excluded people, and in that it could range from a couple hundred people to 1,000 people. It's very variable, and that brings me back to the point that I was going to say about when people sign up to their deed, they say, can you ban me from everywhere in Victoria? And we have a discussion with them about how, first of all, they probably don't need all of Victoria, because most people, you know, if they live in Metro Melbourne, are not going to travel to, you know, Lakes Entrance or Swan Hill, you know, very often. If they are travelling there often, then of course we'll sign them up to that area. But because the staff need to be able to identify the person from their photos, we try to find that comfortable balance between having the definite venues that the patron has been attending, a buffer zone around that, but and then any particular areas they need. But it doesn't cover all of Victoria, so they actually need to nominate suburbs or local council areas that we can drop into their deed. We've been referring to a deed a fair bit today. We actually have a draft of our deed on our website, on the AHA Vic website that you saw on the screen before, along with a document of frequently asked questions as well. So I'd encourage you to please have a look at the draft deed to get an idea yourself what's outlined in there. Another common question that we have is about what happens if I go outside of my area? What happens to those venues? So Michelle and I will frequently process what we call a letter of variation. A letter of variation is a request that the client has made saying, can I add on a different area, a different venue, a different suburb? So maybe if they've moved house or if they've moved work, or they just are wanting to access further away from their home, or, you know, so we can actually send them a letter to sign and drop in new venues. So once the deed is created, we can add in venues. It's actually quite difficult to take venues off. The revocation process is outlined in the deed about people turning off venues, but generally when they sign up to a venue for a period of time, will remain on there for that period of time. So I just wanted to fill in those couple bits that I forgot to mention before.
Thank you. I don't know if anyone's got anything else to offer. One question we just to go back to when we were talking about people who breach on the EGM venue programs and receiving communication on a phone call. And one of the questions was about if someone happens to breach on numerous occasions or multiple occasions, will they receive a phone call / letter each time that they breach?
Yes.
Yes. So there you go. Each time that they breach, they'll have some form of contact, whether it's phone call or letter. We've got due clients, we said that. I think this is addressed to you, Leon.
Yep.
What was the welfare check you mentioned?
Yep. We work on people displaying observable signs. So all our jailers are very proactive. We walk the floor, or staff refer customers to us. If anyone is showing any signs of distress, anger, frustration, falling asleep, looking disheveled, anything that might warrant us going up to them, introducing ourselves, seeing if they're okay, seeing if they need any assistance, that's what we mean by welfare checks.
And another question here is why the lawyer? I assume that refers to
Crown as
they've been
well?
given the opportunity to speak to a lawyer.
Okay.
When they're-
Well, it's because it's a legal document.
Exactly. What have we got here? Recrown. How many people would have access to the photos of those excluded? How many people would see this, and how often would the patrons be checked?
As I said earlier, we circulate that photograph within the company only. So that's to security and surveillance, because they assist us with breaches, so we can recognize patrons. But apart from that, it doesn't go anywhere else.
Yeah, so it's only Crown staff.
It's only
and
Crown staff.
Anyone who's
Yeah.
attended Crown will know there's security at each of the entrances and other places, so they'll be on the lookout for you. Another question here. Okay. Another question here is, what happens to winnings from a patron who is self-excluded in any of the 3 programs? And it is different. I'm happy to say in the EGM venue space, they are not able to withhold winnings or payment or anything else. So that's for the AHA and CCB. So if someone gambles when they're self-excluded, there's no capacity to withhold winnings. But I won't let the Crown guys talk about how that works in the casino, because it's slightly different.
Yep. Under the Act, winnings will be withheld, and it goes to a government community fund.
So basically, the casino have the ability, if they detect somebody gambling self-excluded, to withhold their winnings. Regular EGM venues don't have that ability. So that's a slight difference in the programs as well. And that relates to the programs being set up under different pieces of legislation. What have we got? Does the appearance of the client relate to all areas in Crown? I assume that means when they self-exclude, does it cover all areas of the casino?
Gaming floor only. So irrespective of whether they're gambling or not, they're not allowed to enter the gaming floor. So they can use the restaurants, bars, nightclubs off the gaming floor, but they cannot have a meal in a restaurant that's on the gaming floor.
Yes, exactly. And as we said, that applies to all areas. So table games, EGMs, doesn't matter. Okay. Interested to know about what kind of penalty that a patron may get if their case ends in court. So I assume that relates to the Crown program. About what kind of penalties might be enforced.
Okay. The on-the-spot fine is about $311. If it gets escalated to court, it's $2,000.
And that's based on penalty units, guys. So that'll just change as inflation changes. But that's a decision that the VCGLR make, not Crown. So the VCGLR will make a decision as to whether they issue an on-the-spot fine and whether they choose to proceed down the court action route. I don't think it's saying too much to say that's very rare, if ever happens. So every so often, but not very often. A number of clients say that they walk past the security Crown without being noticed. Do security walk around the floor to check patrons, or will they just be checked at the entrance?
Right. All patrons are advised that the onus is on them to stay away. Security at the entry points are there mainly to check IDs to make sure no underage or intox patrons get through. So they're not there. All security officers are not going to know who's self-excluded. So highly unlikely that a self-excluded patron is going to be stopped unless a security officer recognizes the patron.
Having said that, though, there is capacity for people on the floor checking. So just to reiterate, how
security
that
officers don't walk the floor.
No, but it's not saying too much to say the Crown have staff whose role it is to walk around the floor, check on people's welfare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think in answer to that question, we're basically saying that they may or may not get stopped on entry. Depending on
we make every effort to locate them and remove them. And we even act on every advice that we get from a family member, friend, or even a self-report. We create an alert notice that then creates awareness among staff that so-and-so is breaching, keep a lookout for them.
And that's an interesting point to note, I think, in that talking about self-report. So if you have clients saying that they have breached, we actively encourage you to get that reported in some way, shape or form to the self-exclusion provider, be it Crown or be it the AHA or CCB, because then those organisations can keep a better eye out for that person. So whether that's the client themselves reporting it or you guys getting permission to be able to report it on their behalf, that will make it easier for anyone who is slipping through the net to be detected when or if they try again next time.
Can I just suggest with that a preference of mine is that it's relatively timely, because in the sense that we've had people call us and say, but 6 months ago or 3 years ago, I wasn't excluded from the venue. And so what I'm currently encouraging at the sign-up time is if a person does have any hassles with the program, please call us within 1 or 2 days, preferably, so that we can then action that and try to get on top of it. Because with some patrons I've seen, they talk about how they may call me after the 8th time that they've been, and you know, I'm trying to encourage them to call me when it's starting to be a hassle before it gets, you know, a bit out of control for them. So the sooner we know, the sooner we can try to help, which is what we want to do.
What happens when a self-exclusion deed is due to expire? That's a good question. I might go to the EGM guys first, because obviously Crown's one doesn't expire. So
for us, we send out a renewal notice a month before their deed expires. So it gives them the option to sort of reevaluate where they are at, whether they want to make another appointment before the deed expires, or if they're comfortable and not need the program anymore. But everyone's sent a reminder. Some people do have requested no mail. So, you know, for those people, some people have given an email address in place of that, or otherwise we give them a phone call. But it's noted a month before their deed's due to expire, and majority is done by a hard paper mail out. But as I said, there is a handful that will have no mail, no contact, but we get some other source from them at the time of signing the deed, so we can contact them.
And I imagine very similar process for the AHA, Adrian? Or
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or very similar, exactly the same process for the AHA. So basically, guys, what will happen is those that sign up to the EGM venue program will have something between 6 months and 2 years for a deed. And then 1 month before that deed is going to expire, they'll be contacted by the self-exclusion provider and offered additional assistance. The ability to reapply and renew their deed, so if they want to stay on the program, they can. Or if they're okay, or they no longer need the program, they're just informed that their deed will expire on that day. But it is an important point to note that they are not able to enter the gaming room until that deed expires. You know, I did get a few people when I worked in a venue going, I've got the letter saying this, that's the letter saying it's expiring in a month, not that you can head on in right now. We've got here, what happens when the self-exclusion deed is due to expire? Are there any statistics on how many people sign up and re-sign, amount of breaches, etc.? So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we answered the first part of that question about what happens when a deed is going to expire. Does anyone have anything that they can talk about how many people sign up and how many people then, I think they mean re-sign, as in how many people roll their deeds over?
Yeah, I did. So we did our annual review just recently. So for CCB, we had approximately 1,000 people sign up to the program. So of that 1,000, we had 640 that renewed their deed. So in the balance of that were all new. So yeah, 640 out of 1,000 were all renewals.
Okay, so over 50% were renewals. Does that broadly match what you guys see as well at the AHA?
A lot of the work is renewals, because a lot of people like the program because they get a sense of, like, you know, that personal commitment, and they like to know that if they do go, someone will stop them.
Yeah, and I should add too, with people reaffirming their deed, they do come in and get a new photo and other stuff as well. So you don't have somebody, you know, a photo from the mid-90s still studying with venues. Can family members report breaches to all agencies or just Crown? I suppose that question is basically saying, if a family member wishes to report a breach, how do people, is that something that you guys can take on, or how does that function?
Yeah,
You wanna have
No,
to
no,
first?
go.
Oh,
I did that one.
So we often we will get calls from family members trying to encourage their family members to sign up to self-exclusion or to report a breach. And my approach is always it's much better if there's some openness and transparency in it. I don't like the idea of people necessarily feeling like they're getting talked about behind their back or getting dogged in. But with that said, if the information is coming through and the information is correct, that someone is breaching, then of course we will, take our best efforts to try to work through that situation. But yeah, it's certainly a lot more helpful and easier if there's the openness within the family that they know they're talking and that sort of thing.
Yeah, similar. So if someone just rang up and said, "Oh, my brother's on the self-exclusion program and he's been breaching," we wouldn't contact that patron or client. But if they were breaching, like Adrian said, then that would give us an open door to make contact, because you just don't know at the end of the day if that relative or friend, which is awful to say, but you just don't know if that's true or they're just wanting to cause grief for that particular person. So without documentation that that patron or client has been breaching, we wouldn't make contact. Without clarification from either the venue to say, look, such and such a person's been in, we're really concerned, or something along those lines. But for someone to randomly ring up and speak of a person on the program and there's no other feedback from any other source, we would note it down, but we wouldn't approach and say.
So the flip side of that one that just came up for me is about a sense of confidentiality, in the sense that if, let's say, a wife or husband calls about a wife or husband that's on the program, we're not going to disclose that person is actually on the self-exclusion program unless we've had consent from the actual person signed up to openly discuss it with their significant other person that they've nominated. So, because sometimes that can be, a concern for people. So we take that sort of quite seriously as well.
You've got to respect the patient's privacy. Is it, you guys have any comment on family members reporting?
We get the information. As I said, if they just broadly say so-and-so is breaching, we create an alert notice. We still walk the floor and look for the person. If we get specific information that the patient is currently at Crown, again, we will actively look for the patron. If the patron's in breach, is removed, but we don't disclose any information of how we, knew they were there. There's nothing disclosed to the patient.
Okay, hopefully that answers that question. I see my watch indicates we're approaching towards the end of the time period that we've got. So if anyone's got any other questions, please feel free to type them in. The other thing I can do at this point is, if people are comfortable in terms of audio, if anyone wants to verbalise a question, feel free, but I think text questions work pretty well. But does anyone have any other questions or comments that they'd like to make to any of the various self-exclusion program guys before we finish up?
Just while that's coming through.
Yeah, if anyone's got any final comments, please.
Can I just say about, we really encourage a partnership type approach. So wherever possible with consent between the clients, to liaise with the counsellor. If you want to contact us, please do so, and we'll try to assist you in the best way possible. I think it's also because sometimes we see, sometimes there's resentment issues or like towards venues because maybe people aren't getting picked up enough or anything. So we don't want that to happen, and the staff on the floor at the venues don't want to do that. They want to be able to support the people that are self-excluded. So if there's any other hassles, questions, whatever, please contact us.
Yes, and on behalf of everybody, I'd say some of the contact details for the various programs I put up on slides and stuff. If you've got any questions or anything you think of later that you want to bring up, feel free to contact the guys directly. If you feel more comfortable, feel free to contact me, and I'm happy to pass on any questions that relate to any part of the program. Will the other self-exclusion training in the community coming up be the same as this? So that's directed to you guys at CCV. Will the training be the same as what we've talked about? And I would say no, not exactly.
No, it'll be different because, I mean, you know, yes, we'll cover self-exclusion in general, but it will be a step-by-step process on how you can access the new self-exclusion program. There'll be forms and information there that if you're interested and would like to proceed, we would just need you to fill out the document there, and we'd be in touch with a username and password. So it's all about training and learning how to download the deed.
Exactly. So basically, guys, it will be different, and it'll be more about how you can access the CCV system if you choose to do so.
Yeah,
so
correct.
some of the same information will be in there, but you certainly don't think because you've attended this, you shouldn't attend that training. Thank you. Yes.
If I can just add to, we often have visits from government self-agencies, including, and although we don't participate in the VENI support worker program, but VENI support workers, clinicians, counsellors, community ed, those sorts of people come and visit Crown, and we absolutely extend that invitation to everyone. We also come out to you, and Kate and Susan have been spending a bit of time going out to Gamblers Health and talking to clinicians. So just like to welcome you, and if you want to get in touch with us about bringing a couple of team members, perhaps you've got new ones that haven't been to the centre before, and we can deep dive a bit further into what some of these things are that we mentioned today.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I'd encourage anyone who hasn't taken that up, it's a really good way to find out what goes on down at Crown and get a lot of information and meet people, so you're more happy to talk to each other. All right, well, thank you, everyone. I can see from the comments that people have been relatively positive. That's great. We'll finish up. The other thing I will say is what we'll do is Etty or myself will send you a quick email with a little survey monkey thing about how fantastic everything was. In a little bit later today, just a couple of questions so we can do our evaluation. You guys would know in government we have to evaluate everything, so that'd be great if you could complete that. As I say, if anyone's got any other questions, please feel free to either email or call them through. Can we get a copy of the slides? Yeah, if you want the couple of slides I put together, I'm happy to put them up. And the other thing we'll look to do is we'll edit out all of my ums and ahs, and we'll try and put a video up of what we've talked about as well. But hopefully that will come up relatively quickly. But certainly I will pass on. What's on the slides mainly is the contact details of everybody, so I'm happy to email that out when we email out the survey saying how everything went. If anyone's got any other questions, I'll leave the chat open just for a minute or two. But from my perspective, thank you for coming along, and a big thank you to everyone from the various self-exclusion programs for attending. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.